Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 5, X-Men from the Ashes, written by Jed MacKay. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. Now leading up to this issue, the X-Men have been investigating a series of unusual X-gene activations among adults. So when a new mutant by the name Ben Liu lost control of his powers to warp reality, the X-Men faked his death and brought him to the factory, the new headquarters in Alaska. So ever since then, Ben had remained in a coma, while the X-Men continued to delve into the mystery of his mutant activation. So with that said, this issue opens in a cabin in the woods, and when we get there, we discover that this cabin was far from empty. For inside the cabin was none other than Psylocke and John Greycrow, aka Scalp Hunter, and by the looks of it, they just got done clapping cheeks. But unlucky for John, Psylocke wasn't big into pillow talk, for she was ready to leave once the deed was done. And when he asked her why she is rushing away, Psylocke just simply replies by saying, because that is who she is a tool, a weapon, she was honed sharp and given a killing edge. And as a weapon she needs a purpose, and that is what the X-Men provides for her. So as Psylocke turned away to exit the room, John stated that she didn't have to go, but in Psylocke fashion, she only replied by saying, and you don't have to stay. For he doesn't have to live out there alone, and he doesn't have to pay that awful Amy Vought to teleport him around the world so he could rob banks. So with both individuals at an impasse, Psylocke turns to leave the cabin as John watches her leave. Now the purpose of her leaving the way she did was because she had a psychic rescue mission scheduled for that morning alongside Quentin Quire. So with that going down, we then fast forward to the factory, with both Psylocke and Quentin making their way down the corridor to a door at the end of the hallway. And as they walked, Quentin went on to annoy her about being late, to which Psylocke shoots back by saying that when he finally exhausted her patience, she wouldn't even bother to make his death look like an accident. Now usually this statement would scare anyone, but Quentin was unfazed by it, for he reminded her that once Sabretooth cut his head off and carried it around in a box. So she would have to forgive him if her death threats didn't exactly have him quaking in his kicks. So with the small talk out of the way, the two psychics entered the room and stood before Scott and the Reality Warper mutant from issue number 2. And once they are in there, Scott goes on to state that their mission is to wake Ben Liu from a coma, stabilize his mental state, and bring back some hard intel on what activated his X-gene. Now with their marching orders given, both Quentin and Psylocke took a seat on the floor and interlocked their hands as they activated their abilities and initiated their deep dive into Ben's mind. And as they counted down, the two psychics descended deeper and deeper within Ben's psyche until they appeared within his mind. And once in, Quentin couldn't help but to point out how weird it was, especially because Ben's so-called aliens were flying overhead. Now, following that observation, Quentin then went on to ask Psylocke if she believed he was really abducted by aliens, to which Psylocke replied by saying no. But in order to get to the bottom of it, Psylocke then went on to say the trauma this man suffered was more than surface level, so if they wanted to know more, then they would have to dig deeper. So, with her side blades out, Psylocke slashed the floor beneath her and opened up a hole in the ground that they too dropped down into. And as they fell, both Quentin and Psylocke got to see Ben's earlier life, prior to all this mayhem, and by the looks of it, Ben was a finance guy who lived a corporate life. And as they followed his thoughts, the two found themselves in the back of his drop top driving down the Pacific Coast Highway on a sunny day, until something mysterious happened to him. For a mysterious object lit up the sky, and Ben was rendered helpless as the object abducted him. And once he was taken prisoner, the situation heavily resembled exactly what he thought it was, as mechanical tentacles forced him to conform to what they wanted him to be. And by the way the process looked, it was far from pleasant. In fact, after looking at the panels, I understand why he is as traumatic as he is. So as he lay completely unclothed on the slab, a bright light appeared over him that obscured his line of sight. In fact, it was so bright that both Psylocke and Quentin struggled to see who was really behind everything. But see, the questing game was over real fast, because Psylocke noticed that this was not the work of aliens, but instead the works of a mysterious bald female, a trap that was left behind to punish any nosy ducklings who might come looking into 3K's business. So with that in the air, the mysterious figure let out a massive wave of bugs that washed over our two heroes. Once they were almost completely covered, a gigantic hand emerged from the swarm and gripped Quentin's face. And out of the mountain of insects came Sabretooth in all his horror. Now, this had to be traumatic for Quentin, for during the Sabretooth War, Creed was a complete monster, and Quentin had front row seats to the worst of it. So with that nightmare playing out, we then hop over to Psylocke undergoing her own challenge, but unlike Quentin facing the person who killed him, Psylocke was forced to face the person she was having hookups with. For Greycrow sat depressed and alone with a weapon in his hand. So with the two disasters playing out, we jump back over to Sabretooth torturing Quentin, and with each word spoken, he drove his claws deeper and deeper into his head. In fact, Creed was saying things like no one cares about him and everyone around him will always leave him, which includes people like Wolverine. And as for Psylocke, when she approaches Greycrow, he lets her know that there is no future for a weapon like them. Because if a weapon gets fixed and doesn't want to kill anyone, then that means that weapon is of no use. And from Greycrow perspective, there is only one thing to do with a weapon that doesn't work, so with that said, Greycrow pulls his trigger. Now this noise was so loud that Quentin in his nightmare heard it. So with that validation, Quentin became convinced that this entire thing is a psychic bleed, which means this entire thing isn't real. So with that going down, Psylocke was able to communicate with Quentin, and through their new connection, Psylocke told Quentin that she is not a strong enough psychic to break out. But see, Quentin was, for Quentin is an Omega level mutant, but he had only one problem, and that was if he powered his way through, then Ben would die. So Quentin may have had the raw power to pull it off, but raw power wasn't the only thing needed, for he needed a professional to help, he needed Psylocke. So with that out there, with the help of Quentin's raw power and Psylocke's skill, they was able to escape Ben's mind. And once they were out, they were visibly exhausted and bleeding from every opening in their faces. But despite their appearances, they were able to confirm that they had indeed awakened Ben, and found the needed information on their enemies, who went by the name 3K. Now according to our heroes, 3K was responsible for making New Mutants, for they figured out how to force activate X genes and abducted regular people. And to top everything off, the mysterious bald person was Cassandra Nova, which was a shocker to no one. So with that said, this issue of X-Men came to an end. But anyway, down in the comment section below, let me know your thoughts about this issue and what predictions you could have moving forward. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.